If you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below, share, and hit the notification bell for future content. Thank you.
I did have an experience with an entity. I glanced to my left and the alarms were all set just fine. This woman seated across from me, the cat's on the floor, undisturbed, and we had a conversation telepathically.
Cheers. Welcome to Coffee and UFOs, Terry Lovelace.
Cheers.
So for those just watching this video or this series for the first time, Terry Lovelace is a contactee and experiencer. So I don't think there's anyone better to ask these questions about ufology and the state of and what the heck this phenomena and enigma is. So Terry, tell us really quick a little bit about yourself and your book.
Sure. I'm born in St. Louis, Missouri, 65 years old. I've been retired since 2012. I retired early. Mm-hmm. I made my living, I spent 6 years in the United States Air Force from 73 to 79. After that, I finished a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and then a law degree from Michigan, and made my living in the law, which is why for all these years I couldn't tell this story because of losing the respect of my peers in the legal community and my job probably.
Yeah, that's quite serious. I mean, times have changed, but even now, I can't imagine being in that community and being open about something like this. So normally what I do is I ask, have you seen a UFO? And that is what, your book is about. So what was your experience? If you can, abbreviate it.
Sure. The first UFO I ever saw was 1963. I was 8 years old in our backyard in South St. Louis City. It's an urban area, like brick row houses. Lots of people, lots of traffic, dogs, cats, people outside, nice May day. And I saw this elliptical round actually shadow move across my feet. I looked up and I saw a saucer over my head. And that was my first experience with UFOs.
Yeah.
I saw another one when I was 11 in 1966. And that was pretty neat, outside my bedroom window. And then a long hiatus of not seeing anything until what I refer to as the big event in 1977, when a friend and I went camping at Devil's Den State Park down in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
And we were remote camping. We weren't at a campsite. We were out in the middle of the wilderness, and we were both abducted. So, and that has been, 40 years of nightmares, I'm sure some element of PTSD from it.
Yeah, well, we discussed that on Paranormal Now, how traumatic of an experience that is and how it lives with you for years later. So normally the follow-up question is, you had contact with these beings as well. And what was the impact on you afterward, for, immediately and today?
Well, in 1977, the 1977 abduction, my immediate response was anger, rage. They hurt me. I was pretty badly, like the worst sunburn I'd ever had in my life without blistering. And I had burns to my eyes, they call them flash burns, like an arc welder would get if they didn't use a hood. It's like a sunburn to the cornea of your eye. So, I was pretty ticked off, and but my stance has somewhat softened over the years, and I'm not sure that, I think if they really wanted to hurt me, they could have done far worse, or not dropped us back off like they did.
Right.
So, the analogy I use is like the being that hurt my back, the guy, one entity that was like a doctor. Um, it's like if I could sit down and talk to him today, he'd say, "Hey, man, no hard feelings, just doing my job," kind of a
Right.
kind of a thing. I know that sounds odd, but and maybe there's a little Stockholm syndrome in that somewhere. But
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to soothe yourself, right, years later by telling yourself that. But do you think that really is the case, that there was no malintent at the time?
I don't think so. Looking at it in retrospect, I think we were burned, but I think we weren't burned intentionally. I think the injuries that we suffered were just collateral damage.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, much like Travis Walton, I would assume.
yeah,
Just wrong place, wrong time.
yeah.
Yeah. And what about paranormal experiences? Have you had any contacts with cryptids or ghosts or anything of the like?
You know, I had shortly after I put the book out,
Hmm.
um, well, actually, I should back up. I did have an experience with an entity, and I think I explained it in the final chapter of my book in 2017. Um, in October, third week in October 2017, when I woke up in my living room and there was a woman that I took to be a petite Asian woman sitting in a chair directly across from me. I never have once walked in my sleep. I'm not a sleepwalker. I was confused. How did I get to the living room? But I felt that calm, that calmness. I wasn't afraid of her. I wasn't um, anxious or wigged out. I felt almost sedated. I glanced to my left, and the alarms were all set just fine. This woman seated across from me, the cat's on the floor, undisturbed, and we had a conversation telepathically. And she told me some things. My first thought was, "What are you doing in my living room?"
Sure. Yeah.
Followed by, "Does this have something to do with the things in my legs?"
Hmm.
In 2012, I discovered that on a routine X-ray, I had some pretty odd things in the calf muscle of my right leg
Yeah.
and then above the knee. And at the time, I was having trouble getting a surgeon to remove them because I needed what's called a cardiac clearance letter. Because I have heart disease and I've had a couple of heart attacks. So before a surgeon will touch you, they want a cardiologist to bless you and say, "Hey, you're good to go."
Mhm.
And I was having trouble getting that, so I was considering going to Mexico and having the thing removed. And she told me, she says, if you have it removed, um, she referred to them as her hosts.
Hmm.
I don't know, host is an interesting word. I mean, it can be a noun, it can be a verb. You can host a dinner party, you can be the host of a dinner party. Um,
Uh,
and she says, "I refer to them as my host. You refer to them as aliens, but they're not alien to me."
that's so bizarre. This is a bizarre
So
term.
bizarre term. I agree. Anyway, she said that her host would not allow the thing above my knee to fall into the hands of terrestrial scientists, and they would remove it before that would happen. They would allow that to happen.
So that's interesting, because that is the conjecture, I think, that's predominant in the field of ufology, is that, well, why don't they make themselves known? What's the deal? Why are they so hidden? What's the mystique all about? And I think the general consensus is speculative, that they just don't think we're ready to be given or handed over the advances in technology that they have.
Yes, yes. I for the past year, I've experienced a lot of anxiety just about the future.
Hmm.
And I spent a week with Whitley Strieber at a Lakota Indian reservation in Pine Ridge, South Dakota
Okay.
last June. And we were talking about this feeling and of the consensus of the people, other people in attendance there, Yvonne Smith and a few other people that were there. And the consensus was that everyone is feeling this sense of anxiety that, something's coming. I interpreted that to be maybe a disclosure coming.
Yeah.
And Whitney and I both agreed back around before Christmas that February of 2020 would be an eventful month. And I even went so far as to say that in February 1st, 2020, things are going to change. And February 2nd, it'll be a different world.
Yeah. Oh, and it has.
It has.
It's interesting. A trusted friend of mine who's wise in these matters suspected that we would have a recession naturally, just through economics in the market,
Yes.
by this spring. That's when he was expecting it, and I thought that was odd that timing was just linked perfectly with what happened with the coronavirus. And I wonder if there's a sort of like intuitive influence in his prediction there, that he also felt something else, but just didn't consciously, was not aware of it.
That's the right word. It's an intuitive feeling. It's For me, it was a compulsion. I sold some stock January 31st based on that compulsion.
Yeah, well, we did a similar thing in 2008. Just listening to programs, listening to reading the papers, and we just said, maybe it's time we get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
And like literally just a couple of months later, the market crashed. And we're not financial geniuses or anything like that. It was just like this kind of feeling like, I don't know, something's off.
Yeah. I really pay attention to that. I listen to my gut. And a lot of times my gut feelings will override my intellect, and because it's usually right.
Yeah.
I had an interesting discussion real quick I want to tell you about.
Sure.
Talked to a guy who's a software engineer at a master's level, works for the United States government, and we were talking about artificial intelligence. And he was telling me that when he writes a program, he writes a program towards a goal. And he does some work with AI, and he said with AI, it's absolutely backward that you start with the goal and then ask it to write the program.
Huh.
So what they did was he and a bunch of his coworkers proposed to AI, how do we cure cancer? And the answer that it formulated was, first, infect every human being on the planet with cancer. See who has natural immunity. Allow the others to die by natural selection. Those that are resistant to cancer will repopulate the world, and that's the cure for cancer.
Yeah, the problem with AI is they don't have morals.
Right.
I mean, that's a sort of sadistic debate that people have had for a long time, and it's actually not far off from the idea of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like an inoculation or an antiviral, to kind of just vaccine. Geez, to inoculate everybody with this one thing, but at low doses, so that we just build up a tolerance for it. So, we don't have to kill people off in order to do that.
Yes.
So what does that mean, though? I mean, can you really take anything from that AI's recommendation?
Well, no. I mean, I think the takeaway is that that's the way that AI thinks. I mean, I don't know if ET is ruled by thinking sentient beings that are moral, or is AI or is ET an artificial intelligence?
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
which would explain some insensitivity that is taking place. Not torture, not from in the vast majority of cases, it's not seemingly to be cruel in any way, just insensitive.
Yes, just pragmatic to a fault.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
Yeah. Um, when she said hosts, this woman who appeared, are her hosts do they look the same as your hosts? Because we have all these different people who have abduction experiences, and they see different types of beings.
I've seen a couple different types of beings. I saw her in my living room the one time.
Yeah, and you think she is an alien, or she was some kind of apparition?
I asked her what she was,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that she was a hybrid.
Okay, all right.
So,
That would then okay. So I understand the word host a little bit better then in that context.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and then so what did they look like when you saw them?
This woman, this woman that I saw in 2017 looked
Mm-hmm.
like a petite Asian woman dressed in black, sitting in a non-threatening posture with her legs crossed.
Mm-hmm.
She had on like nursing heels with nursing shoes that were black with a higher heel to give her some height. She had on a cheap black wig that was on her head, kind of askew.
Ah,
I
interesting.
actually, in the book, I named her Betty because she reminded me of Betty Rubble from the Flintstones. um, and she wore these oversized black glasses, sunglasses, and a red scarf tied around to disguise a pencil thin neck.
Yeah.
And I had the thought, my God, I wish she'd take those glasses off. And she did so immediately.
And do you think that the wig was covering up like an abnormal shaped head or baldness or?
I think it was covering up an abnormally shaped head. That's why the wig did not fit her head,
Right.
because the back of her head was large and bulbous, and the wig was obviously meant for a human head.
Yeah.
And
So if she was walking down the street, though, she would not necessarily look like she stand out like an alien. She, just might be a slightly odd looking woman.
yes, I think that's true.
And then what did the aliens look like?
Well, in 1977, when I was abducted, I saw the ubiquitous little gray guys,
Yeah.
3.5 feet tall, that I don't think are sentient beings, that I think are, maybe robotic, maybe they're AI and, quantum computing and nanotechnology, God knows what. Um, I
Did
saw
they have big black eyes or?
they did have big black eyes, but not grotesquely big like you see in motion pictures.
Right. Yeah, because there's always that conversation of ever since Strieber's communion. Then it was after that there was a sort of proliferation of reports of Greys that have big black eyes, um, whereas up until that point, the most akin description was by uh, Benny and Barty Hill, and it looked like a Grey, but it had more cat-like eyes. More almost human cat-like eyes. It wasn't the big black, just abyss. And that was similar to what you saw in Close Encounters of the Third Kind in Steven Spielberg's film. So I'm always looking to hear reports of big black eyes pre-communion, because I find that informative, if
Yes.
nonetheless.
I think Whitley Strieber's The Cover of Communion pretty much nails it. And nailed it is very close to
Mm-hmm.
what I saw. Um, and when I saw that book for the first time, I almost passed out.
That's so many people. That was their experience, right? Yeah.
I asked him. I said, Whitley, why did you choose that image for the
Mm-hmm.
cover of your book? And he said, matter of factly, well, that's what they look like.
Yeah, but then you had numerous people had the same experience. They walked into a bookstore, they saw this book on a shelf, and it just like bam, something hit them.
Yes.
Now could that be a collective consciousness, or do you think each and every one of those people were abductees, or what do you think?
You know, it could be something in our collective unconscious. I mean, it's kind of far-fetched, but it's not unheard of as a theory that, you know, maybe we can carry genetic bits of memory from 10 or 20 generations ago.
Yeah,
And who knows how long we've been interacting with these things.
right.
And then the flip side of that is that a whole lot of people have been abducted and have no idea.
Well, that's a whole nother, and you can't study that, unfortunately. I mean, you have no numbers, no data. You can only just base it off of the percentage of the population that is aware or have at least reported an abduction. And I'm sure that not every reported abduction is an actual abduction. You know, I think sometimes people do have, experiences that come from a place of trauma in their mind. They might have
Yeah.
seen something on TV. They have dreams that seem real. I accept that. But clearly there are a number of people that have very real experiences. Um,
You know, in the back of my book, I give an email address and I say, look, I'm not a doctor or a therapist,
mhm.
uh, but if you've had an experience and you want to share it, you know, email me and I'll email you back.
Yeah,
Well, I've got 1,280 some emails as of this morning.
they haven't opened up yet.
No, I open up every one every
Every day.
morning and reply to every single one.
Wow.
So, but you know what's great is that of that 1,200,
Hmm.
there's a core group of about 700 that have this really strong thread of commonality and have a real ring of truth to them.
Hmm.
And they all start off with, you're going to think I'm crazy. Please don't think I'm nuts. You
Yeah.
know, there's nothing wrong with my vision. They always start off with a disclaimer like that. And then they tell me these most amazing stories. Uh, and then follow up with an almost apologetic final paragraph. But I'm collecting them, and I think I'm going to de-identify them and make them part of a book because some of the stories are just so amazing.
Do you think it's apologetic because there's a tiny bit of shame or embarrassment in sharing the story, even though they feel more comfortable sharing it with you?
You know, I think ET wires us to not want to share these
Hmm.
stories.
Okay.
I've had a lot, I mean, many, probably 40 at least, emails from people who shared an experience with a family member or a close friend and spent a lifetime and never talked about it.
Yeah.
You know, I had this one woman, she and her sister were abducted when they were 8 and 11 respectively. And they spent a lifetime and never talked about it. And when her younger sister were on her deathbed with cancer, she asked for the first time, she says, do you want to talk about what happened at the grandpa's farm? And she said, no, turned her face to the wall and died the next day.
Wow.
So that's a pretty strong programming.
I suppose it's I suppose it could be programming. It does remind me a little bit of when someone comes back from a war, or any other traumatic experience. You know, they just personally don't. They say what they need to say, or feel like they've said it once, and they don't need to talk about it again.
Well, you know what was odd was I experienced that myself because when my friend and I drove back to 6.5 hours to get back to the air base after we were abducted,
Hmm.
I mean, there were no more than 6 words said between us. Um, and we were changed people after this abduction. I mean, we were close friends. You know, we were both 20. I was 22. He was 23. Um, but I didn't want anything to do with the guy, and I can't understand that emotion. I
Well,
certainly didn't want to sit down and debrief with him.
sure, but the person you had the experience with, he went on a very different trajectory than you did.
He
Um,
sure did.
he didn't handle it well at all,
Yeah,
and I think you said he went he used alcohol, and really struggled with depression and that sort of thing.
he did. He did. He lost a career and a marriage, and very much a shame. He's an incredibly bright guy. I
Yeah.
mean, and just just a shame.
There are so many different aspects of ufology, and the abduction category is a big one unto itself. So answer however you want. What would you change right now if you could just snap your finger, change in ufology across the board?
I think what I would change is the general public's misconception that this is fiction or fantasy, or, I had an Uber driver when I went to the airport in February to go to San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
who's like, I normally don't tell people what I do, and he's like, well, what are you doing? You going to a conference? Oh, cool. So, it's 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book about UFOs. So he says, oh, that's comic book stuff. And that's really, I'd like to see that change.
Yeah,
a bit more open-minded. You don't have to believe, but don't out of hand dismiss it.
exactly. Yeah. I have such mixed feelings. I do on the one hand appreciate shows like Ancient Aliens. It's created a sort of proliferation of awareness and interest in the subject, but at the same time, someone like that person might look at a show like Ancient Alien and be like, "Ugh, it's just entertainment," and therefore they don't take it seriously.
I had that exact same feeling.
Yeah. What would you want to see in the future for ufologists? What should the field be doing different in their research?
I'd like to see university study. I'd like to see some type of peer review.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see it accepted as a legitimate area of academic study. But right now, it's frowned upon in academic circles. There are some exceptions to the rule. Leslie Kane, the New York Times reporter, I'm sure you know, and I were invited to speak at Rice University in November of last year. And I spoke on alien abduction, and she spoke on the UFO phenomenon. And we spoke to faculty members in the humanities department from all disciplines, including divinity, and PhD candidates only. No press, no fake cameras, just us being candid and speaking and telling these people. And I thought that was just an excellent exercise. I'd love to see more universities kind of take that step and open that door.
How did you arrange that, or how was that arranged?
I have no idea. Jeff Kripal is the head of the humanities department at Rice University, and Jeff has also co-authored about 6 books with Whitley Strieber. So maybe my connection with Whitley roundabout got through to Jeff Kripal, and I got an invitation. And, or maybe Leslie, I'm not sure, I didn't ask, but I wasn't sure how we'd be received. We were very well received.
I was going to ask, yeah, that's very, very, very interesting. I think, so not having cameras, not having anybody report, as on site, maybe made them more receptive and comfortable,
It made me more comfortable.
Interesting. Okay.
I felt that I could be more candid. I also, when I give a presentation at a conference, I try to be a bit entertaining without detracting from the seriousness of the matter. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel the need to do that. I just felt the need to just tell the story and just be honest and open, and that worked. I think that was.
Well, a lot of conferences, you have these just almost diametrically different approaches towards ufology. So, I hear from people who do these conferences that it's odd for them to be up presenting their theory, or topic, whatever it might be. Like if it's something a little bit more conservative, ufology, and then the next person comes up and said ETs are sending a message to save humanity, and they come to me like angels, and So how do you feel about that, like that hodgepodge of approaches, at serious conferences?
I got to tell you, I was just at UFO Con in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a good conference. There were a lot of people there, and including Chris Bledsoe, who it was his first time speaking at a conference, and he was fascinating. But so many people there are so many just disconnected stories that seem to run contrary to one another. Everybody's had a different experience.
Right.
And, that either means that maybe this is confabulation or some type of delusion, or maybe there are dozens or hundreds of different entities that interact with us from different star systems or interdimensional or, more than one kind of being. So
I think that could also then, contribute to the skepticism and confusion about what ufology is. So when people are from the outside looking in, they're like, I don't know what to make of this thing. Like you go to a conference on biology. We know what biology is. We get it.
yes,
So what is it? Human biology? Is it animal? Is it veterinarian? Whatever it might be. Is a study of bacteria. It's in a box, and we get it. But then you look at ufology, and it's like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. It's just all over the place.
yeah, that's why I think that the cure for that is serious scientific study, peer review, published papers. And then, it's not the kind of thing that lends itself to peer review. It's like ghosts and Bigfoot and
Yeah.
I've never had any experiences with Bigfoot, or I know nothing about the Bigfoot phenomenon.
Right.
But I know people that do, and they are as passionate about Bigfoot as I am about ET.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder if maybe they're all interconnected somehow.
I think a lot of people do. They wonder that, and I think that's a legitimate question. But again, like if you're looking at ufology from the outside in, that's why you have like the old guard of ufologists that are like, please keep that stuff out. We just want to talk about documents and what's caught on camera, aviation reports, really what they would consider more legit and concrete work. But I'm in the basket with others that say, yeah, you know what? Let's be brave about this. Let's look at all these odd overlapping events. And the public's been struggling with this for a long time anyway. So if there's a line of investigation, no matter how bizarre it is, we have the responsibility to follow that line of investigation, no matter how strange.
Yeah, we're human animals, and we have that inbred curiosity to
Right. Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at the unknown.
And that's what this all is. I mean, unless it's someone like yourself who's had, direct contact. For so many of us, I mean, I saw a very, basic UFO in the sky. But people like me or people who've never seen a UFO, it's curiosity.
Yes.
It's what is this mystery?
Yeah. And I'm left with as many questions,
Sure. Yeah.
than I have answers for, too.
Yeah. And
So,
I suspect you actually have more questions than the rest of us because of your experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to sit down with one and have a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that that's possible. I don't know. The analogy I like to give is that when I was inside the craft in '77, I locked eyes with this being
Yeah.
who was about 6 foot tall, pinkish, white, chalky complexion, um, large eyes, but more like wraparound Ray-Bans,
Mm-hmm.
just two nostrils, a slit for a mouth, and we locked eyes. And for a moment, I mean, just by happenstance, I'm looking in his direction. He turns around, and then boom,
Yeah.
we're looking at one another. And this guy was in my head. I mean, I swear he was in my head, and he knew me. He knew my wife. He knew my secrets, my plans.
Mm-hmm.
He knew everything. And just what I got back from him was just like raw intellect. It's like when my dog puts his head in my lap and I pet him and I look in his eyes, and in his eyes I see he knows I'm the alpha. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in charge.
Right.
You know, in this exchange in 1977, I felt like the dog.
Wow.
Is the best way I can explain it. So maybe we're not even capable of having an exchange with them in a meaningful way.
In a meaningful way, perhaps. Yeah, perhaps it's rudimentary what we could, or perhaps they can come to our level and communicate on our level, but we just can't communicate at their highest level.
Yeah, you know, I think about all the species of animals in
Mm-hmm.
this world, and there's not a single species we can really communicate with. I mean, you know, yeah, we can teach chimpanzees to recognize certain geometric patterns and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, we
Well,
can't
I
have a
mean,
conversation.
well, gorilla, we can do sign language.
Yeah,
Um, you
sure.
know, what's the name of that famous gorilla? I can't remember. Um,
Coco.
Coco. Yeah, yeah, Coco.
Yes.
I mean, Coco could not get to the human intellect level, but Coco can actually express, I want this, or I feel a certain way. You know, that's if that's possible from human to ape, then I could imagine that a more highly evolved alien to human would be similar.
I would think so.
Yeah.
You know what fascinated me about Coco is when they gave Coco the kitten,
Yes.
and
Oh my.
Coco fell in love with this kitten.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
had this, that was really touching that, you know, this animal, I don't know, it gives me a new respect for animal species as a whole. I mean, I
Yeah.
like animals anyway.
Did you see the video with Robin Williams when he went to visit Coco?
No, I didn't. I have
Really
not.
touching. Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, Coco is kind of almost, for lack of a better word, flirting, with
Yeah,
Robin Williams. It's just odd, but endearing at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did see a video of a guy playing piano for an elephant. And
Yeah.
that I saw that on YouTube just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
That was really touching.
Well, I mean, we leave our cat Maya with my parents on occasion if we travel, and my mom was the first to discover. She's like, your cat really likes soothing music, just like calm music, and she reacts to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love cats.
So by the time we post this video, it'll probably be about 2 weeks from now. I'm assuming by then we're still going to be in the heat of the coronavirus epidemic, the COVID-19. So what would you share with people or recommend with people how to manage this and deal with it?
You know, I can only say what I've done, and as someone with you know, with a history of heart disease, who's over 65,
Mm-hmm.
um, I take it extremely seriously. You know, my wife and I have been locked in our home for 2 weeks already.
Yeah.
You know, I visit my grandkids via Zoom or Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I wear gloves and spray my nail with a 15% chlorine bleach solution. Let it sit for 4 days before I open it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm probably over the top. I'm probably
That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty intense. Now I feel bad. I'm like, oh no, should we do that?
but you know, I read an article about I read a book actually about the 1918 flu epidemic. And part of
Mm-hmm.
the reason that spread so far so fast was that most people had mail delivery twice a day back in the day.
Oh, interesting.
And,
Huh.
and people licked envelopes and licked stamps. And,
Yeah.
so even these little towns that isolated themselves, they got the 1918 Spanish influenza because the mailman brought it.
Wow, you're right. We were just on, I don't know, it's so hard to follow the news coverage on this and what's 100% accurate or not. But yesterday I was watching the news and it said the Princess Cruise Line, they found evidence that there was a coronavirus still surviving 17 days
I heard that.
afterwards. I mean, that takes this about the problem to a whole new level, if that's the
It
case.
really does.
Yeah. So I've already, mentioned on this program, my thoughts and suggestions on the idea of how to manage this. So I'll not say anything more about that. I just hope that this is over soon. Hopefully by the time we post this video, we're going to be like, hitting the crest of the wave and moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's back on track and business as usual.
Yeah.
Although I think we'll come out of this changed. I mean,
I think we will too. I'm hopeful. I think it's inevitable out of every major shift in humanity. There are positive changes that come out of it. We evolve, we invent, we adapt in new ways. So it'll be interesting to see, what comes of this. And hopefully as a society, worldwide, not just the US, we will evolve a little bit more. That's the only hope that I can wish for.
I was touched. I saw the UN Secretary General, and I can't tell you his name, make a plea on, I forget what may have been BBC.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, or Al Jazeera, and he said, "I'm going to ask for a truce, a ceasefire globally for all conflicts. Civil war, declared war, anything. We all stop fighting each other. And for right now, let's just fight this disease."
Yes.
And boy, if we could do that, maybe there's hope we can live in a better world.
Yeah, I hope so. If we can just, put love above, then we'll be in a better place. So.
Sure enough.
All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
All right.
My coffee's cold, but
so was mine, but nothing stops me from drinking my coffee.
I agree. Well, cheers.
If you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Share, and click the notification bell for future content. Thank you.